The Wisconsin Senate today passes a Republican-backed proposal putting Wisconsin's voter ID law on the ballot in April, that is, to be considered for a constitutional amendment.
Before that happens, though, it must still pass the Assembly, which is expected to vote next Tuesday. Jason Zimmerman spoke to lawmakers on both sides of the aisle today about the impact. He's live in our studio now with a First Alert update. Jason.
Bill, the legislature has only been in session 3 days now, and this is the first proposal being taken up. Republicans say there's widespread support for enshrining voter ID as a law, even as Democrats argue it's an attempt at suppression.
Just months ahead of what's likely to be a hotly contested state Supreme Court race on the April ballot, Assembly Republicans now just a vote away from also adding a constitutional amendment concerning the voter ID law. Democrats say it's more about the GOP attempting to motivate their base.
They so much as admitted that in the hearing. They did say that they were worried about the Supreme Court race and the makeup of the court, so definitely think that is part of it.
During a Republican news conference in Howard Wednesday, it's a question we also posed to State Representative Ron Tussler.
If this was just something that base supporters were supporting, then maybe that would be true, but it's not. This is something 84% of Wisconsinites. So if 70% of Democrats are in favor of this, according to that poll, it would drive their people out too. So I don't agree with that.
Democrats have long opposed voter ID, saying it makes it tougher for some people to cast a ballot. And the possibility of Democrats regaining control of the legislature 2 years from now has Republicans taking action to protect laws already passed.
I think we all agree that we only want people who are legally eligible to vote to be voting. Voter ID requirements have not done anything to address any voter fraud. In fact, voter fraud is infinitesimal. It's like 0.0004%. You're more likely to be struck by lightning.
The race in April for the state Supreme Court will decide whether liberals maintain control for the next 3 years. The Democratic-backed candidate, Dane County Circuit Judge Susan Crawford, was the lead attorney in a 2011 lawsuit challenging the voter ID law.
So to be very clear, this amendment does not add any new restrictions on voting. It merely continues what we are doing right now. And it enshrines it into the Constitution so that in the future, no activist judge can take this away from us.